Welcome! We're going to be using the hot pack method today, so our meat will be just browned in the pan. And just as a reminder, I'm in Florida, so the pressure recommendations will be based on being at sea level. And here I'm using locally raised organic ground beef, no antibiotics, pasture raised, grass fed, and grass finished. At this step, you want to dump out any grease in between batches. It's not totally necessary, but it's going to make sure that your jars look much cleaner and much prettier when you're all finished with them. Here you can use any liquid that you like. Some people use water, some people use bone broth. I am using organic beef broth that is low sodium. This is something my aunt and I say about the vinegar, but it does keep any white cast from getting on your jars from having hard water. The whole point of having your jars in the oven is not necessarily to sterilize, it's so that they're warm, so when you pour your boiling water into the jar, it's not going to crack it from having boiling hot liquid into a cold jar. So the point is really just to make sure that they're the same temperature so you don't have any issues compromising the integrity of your jar. You'll see me using the back of my spoon here to kind of tamp down the meat in the jar, and you really don't want to smush it down too tight in the jar. You just want to make sure that you're utilizing as much space in the jar as you can, so that way when you pour your liquid over whatever you're using, you're not really filling the whole jar full of liquid. It's just to get into those little spaces, that way there's not any air in our jar. Obviously, we're not vacuum sealing our jar, so there is going to be air in our jar, but you'll see me using the plastic knife around the rim of the jar. I'm just trying to dislodge any bubbles that may be hiding up underneath some of the ground beef. We want to decrease our chances of foodborne illness, and we don't want any pockets of air that may contain some bacteria that aren't going to get killed by the heat of the pressure canner. This is the step where, if it matters to you, you want to line up the design on the jar to make sure that the lid label is straight with it. So that's just something I do. I like to where, all my cans are on the shelf and they're all facing the same way with the design on the front, and all my labels are straight. So make sure at this step that you adjust it, because where you put them is where they're going to stay. Keep in mind, I'm using a 23-quart pressure canner, so I can fit up to 20 pints in here. We would do a double layer. You would have a little rack in between your two layers, but here for the purpose of this video, I'm only doing 5 pints, so you put them in a single layer at the bottom. At 10, it should be at 11. So when that happens, it's like a pound or a pound and a half away from your goal. You want to slightly lower the heat just a bit. So let's put it down to 5. Give it a few more minutes. Here we are at 10 pounds of pressure, maybe even 11, just to be safe. This is when we start our timer. So let's start our timer for ground beef for 1 hour, 15 minutes. If your rocker starts going crazy and the pressure's going too high and it's up to 15, we definitely need to turn the heat down. And on the opposite end, if the pressure goes below 10, you kind of have to start the timer all over again. So you really want to monitor your time here, make sure it's consistently at 10 or above, 10, 11, 12, anywhere in that range. So I like to sit in the kitchen just a little bit farther away from the canner just so I can periodically peek in and look at it. For example, my canner is heating up way too quickly. We're already at almost 14, so I have decreased the heat significantly. We are probably going to decrease it just a little bit more even, maybe down to 3. And then we're going to watch it closely until the pressure stabilizes. I'm going to pop back in to say we're pretty stable now here, but I have lowered the temp way down to like a 1. So it's okay if you do that. Once it gets to temperature, it kind of stays there on some stoves. I just have a cheap 4-burner stove. So mine maintains heat really well. So I have lowered the heat a lot and it's just chilling. So now I'm just gonna kind of hang out in the kitchen and wait for the timer. Here we are, an hour and 15 later. We're just gonna go ahead and turn the heat off and then don't touch anything. Leave it all alone until that valve in the front drops flat and the pressure reads 0. This is the part with pressure canning that is so time consuming. You have to wait for the temperature to come all the way back down to 0 before you can mess with it. If you're water bathing, you can just turn the temp off and pull your jars out of the pot. But here, this is what takes so much time. You have to just let things calm down by themselves and don't intervene. Sometimes I tap the little rocker with a wooden spoon just to make sure that it didn't get stuck and there is no steam that still needs to come out. It's just a double check to make sure. When you're unlocking your pressure canner, you just want to be really careful, go very slow. If you hear any like hissing as if the pressure is coming out, leave it alone for a while longer. I was just being extra careful because I felt the steam was still very hot. When you take things out at this step, you want to go really slow. Even just pulling them up out of the canner the way I am, there's something called siphoning that happens if you do it too fast. It's a rapid change in temperature and actually all the liquid that's in the jar is still boiling and it can shoot up through the lid. So you just want to be really careful and go really slow. And here we are, this is the last step. You can still see the water boiling, so these may take a while for the lids to do that ping and the seal to stick. So give it enough time for it to cool down and seal before you worry about that. Thanks for watching.